right. So what I'd love to do is get started, keep this as informal as possible. My name is David Rode. I am joining you today from crisp and was previously sunny New York City. Carla is in the Twin Cities with her own startup, Soak It Up. And she is a lifelong friend and is helping me today so I can concentrate on what I'm saying, and she'll help monitor the chat and some other things that are going on. Welcome to Stephen as well. So I encourage you at any point to chime in with questions. I don't know if you have the ability to unmute yourself and ask a question, but certainly use the chat or the Q&A to post any comments or questions you have, and we will address them as soon as we become aware of them. And if not, certainly when I get through my prepared remarks, which won't be all that long, I'd really love to focus on the issues that are most pressing and most important to you. And I will also say that we will make a copy of these slides available in a PDF version. Anyone who wants a copy, please put your email address in the chat or the Q&A, and we will make sure we get these to you after we are done today. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I am a consumer packaged goods marketer by original trade, working with Procter & Gamble and H.J. Heinz. That was the early part of my career, and that's shaped my DNA and how I approach a lot of problems. I then shifted into the nonprofit space. I founded and scaled a youth sports organization that was able to help children all throughout the world, and ran that for almost 15 years. We grew the organization largely through strategic partnerships. One of those partnerships was with the Minnesota Twins. It was a baseball-related organization, and we worked very closely with them. I have a lot of fond feelings and fond memories towards the Twin Cities area. And I am currently leading a nonprofit consultancy called .org, and we focus on strategic planning, fundraising, board development, and rebranding efforts to help our clients achieve their goals. Education-wise, I received my MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and I currently teach nonprofit branding at the University of Pennsylvania. As I said, I live in New York City. I'm a father of three. I'm married. I have a 1.5-year-old puppy, and I am training for the Chicago Marathon, which is less than 3 weeks away. And I'd love to tell you I have a lot of confidence in myself right now, but it wanes, and we'll see how I do come October 10th. So that's a little bit about me. Let's move on to the next slide. And what I would love to do is understand a little bit more about why you are here. So if you don't mind, either in the chat, or I actually listed these 3 questions in the Q&A. I already have your names, but just list your name, the nonprofit organization you are affiliated with, and what you're hoping to get out of this session. I would, again, while I have some prepared remarks, I really want to make sure that I spend time on the issues that are most pressing and most critical in your world, and why you chose to spend time with me today to hear what we're going to talk about. So take a moment and do that if you can. The chat and the Q&A should be to the right. It says event, and then it says session. You would click on session, and then there's some tabs there you can find. All right, Zach and Marty, thank you so much. And if anybody else has an opportunity to add in your information or what you're hoping to get out of this, that would be really helpful. The structure of this conversation today is going to really center around 4 areas that I have experience in and strong feelings about in terms of their relevance and their importance if you are launching, growing, and sustaining a nonprofit organization. And as you can see, those include funding, the role of the board, measurement and evaluation, as well as the focus you need, which I hope that you would derive from some type of a strategic plan. So from a funding perspective, you really need to be clear-minded about who is going to fund your organization. I'll give you a perfect example. I ran, as I said, a baseball charity, and I had in my mind that, well, players are definitely going to want to fund this organization. These players are making a lot of money, and they'll definitely want to support the kind of work we are doing. And as soon as I was into the organization for a short period of time, I realized that that was maybe just my hopes and dreams, but not the likely outcomes of my hard work. So you're going to really want to pressure test who's going to fund your organization. Think long and hard about that. And we'll go into each of these 4 areas in more depth. From a board perspective, I would just encourage you to be very selective about sort of the offering / handing out of potential board seats, and really think with strong intention around this area of capacity building, which could be fundraising, but there's other types of capacity that you need potentially within your organization. If you're not familiar with the whole area of measurement and evaluation, it's critical, and it's becoming more important, I think, over the last 10 years, that you be able to demonstrate the impact that the work your organization is having, how it is making a difference. And this should be tied into your theory of change. We could discuss theory of change either in the context of this conversation or outside of this, if that's something you're not familiar with. And lastly, as I mentioned, the importance of having a strategic plan to kind of figure out what you should do, and in some situations, and maybe more importantly, what you shouldn't be doing with your time and your resources. So let's jump into funding with a little bit more granularity. So when you're funding your nonprofit organization, many of us have gone down the path of, no, that's okay. The next one, perfect. We tap our friends and our family for resources. Nonprofit organizations are a business. They are a non-for-profit organization, but they're a corporation, and you need working capital. You need money to launch an organization. And unless you are independently wealthy, you're going to need to find some funding in order to do that. Friends and family are a common stopping point, but it's also something that you should be aware of has a limited shelf life. And if you want to keep having friendly Thanksgiving dinners and not have your friends cross the street when they see you, you may want to think about keeping this limited in terms of how often you consider the friends and family approach. So it's fine up front, but it is not a long-term funding possibility. When you think as you go down the road, foundations especially, so there are government grants and there are private foundations, family foundations, et cetera, which can be an important source of funding. Many organizations, whether they're corporate or foundation support, want to know that you're a sustainable organization. So if you've just launched within the last 3 or 6 months, that is likely going to be something that's going to create a lot of caution on behalf of a funder, because they want to make sure that you're going to be around before they are going to consider giving you resources. There's certainly a chicken and an egg component to that, but you should just be aware of the fact that some require you to be in operations for at least a year. Some require you to be in operations for at least 3 years before you might even be eligible. We talked a little bit about proof of concept. You need to be able to demonstrate the impact, and you need to be able to have that so that you can get support funding. This is critical to everything that goes on in the funding world. And certainly when you are talking about different donors, different funding streams, they might have different standards, different criteria in terms of what they are looking for. If I am talking to you as a prospective individual donor, you might be very satisfied with just understanding the mission of the organization and hearing an anecdote or two about how we have made an impact on whatever our target audience is. But as you get into corporate funding and institutional funders like grant makers, then you're going to have a stronger proof of concept. And then when you look at funding, this is where I think your board has to be an important instrument of growth for the organization. They have to be willing and active fundraisers, and if they are not, they are really going to potentially limit the growth potential of the organization or extend the time horizon where you're going to be able to achieve the kind of impact you're hoping to have. So let's talk a little bit more about your board. Building your board, and I say build it with intention. When I've added board members historically, there are two things that board members want to know, and I'll certainly go through the bullet points that I have, but I wanted to make this point before I distracted myself, which is board members want to know what their time commitment is going to be because they want to be successful and they don't want to disappoint you. So you need to be clear-minded about what is expected of a board member in terms of their time. They also want to know who else is on your board. And this is not everyone, but it is many people. They view a board as a means to extend their professional network. And if your board is comprised of your brother, your mom, your neighbor, your this, your that, that is going to send a certain set of signals to other prospective board members. So the first or second board member you add might have a disproportionate impact on future board members. So really, please keep that in mind. And when you're thinking about potential board members, it's really not enough for a board member to just be passionate about the kind of work that your organization is doing. In my situation, baseball and softball, yeah, everyone that I was talking to about this already had strong feelings about and was deeply passionate about baseball and softball. And you can plug in whatever the mission of your particular organization is for those words, but it's simply not enough for them to be passionate about the work you're doing. They're going to have to be understanding about what's really expected and required of them to be a successful board member in terms of governance, in terms of attending meetings, in terms of being a brand ambassador, in terms of fundraising. So the next piece is really about having board member roles and responsibilities that are articulated clearly and something that you can share and discuss with prospective board members. So if somebody is thinking about becoming a board member, or you would like to recruit somebody to be part of the board, you can share this with them and use that document as a basis for a conversation to make sure there's clarity and buy-in around what you are expecting and what they are able to give and provide. The conversation with prospective board members about fundraising should be something that is done up front before they become a board member. Many organizations will have what's called a give or a get target. And just for those who haven't heard that expression, give or get means if I, as a board member, am expected to give or get $5,000 in an individual year, I can do that by either writing a check for $5,000 to keep this example simple, or I could go out and ask other people for sums of money that would be equivalent to or greater than $5,000. So understanding what that target is, and having that conversation before they join the organization, I think is critical. And then I like to vet prospective board members about their prior both board experience and their prior fundraising experience. And if they have, then let's talk openly about what went well, what didn't go well, what they were hoping for in the future. If they do not have prior board or fundraising experience, that's fine, but it may then be a bit of a red flag, and you may have to spend more time training them and getting them in a position where they are able to provide the kind of support that you are hoping for with your board. Now, I highlighted earlier the importance of measuring impact from day one. Measurement and evaluation is a requirement to participate in institutional funding. And what I mean by measurement and evaluation is the following. For those that are, again, these terms may be either new or maybe something you've heard about but don't have a lot of experience with. Funders are not looking to understand how many meals you served. They're looking to understand, because these meals were served by your organization, those people were transformed in a certain manner. They were able to do certain things. They were healthier. They were able to go to work. They were able to do whatever. So the measurement and evaluation is critical to be able to approach a potential grant funding organization. They are not going to be satisfied with individual stories and quotes and testimonials. You're going to need data that you can present to them to strengthen whatever application you are sharing. And as part of this, many organizations understand that measurement and evaluation takes time, it takes money, it takes resources. And I really would encourage anyone who is entering or new to the nonprofit space to understand that just because you don't have a lot of resources is not really an excuse to not be doing this measurement from day one. So it's lack of resources is not an excuse for lack of rigor. It means you have to come in and figure out a creative solution to measuring the impact of your work, even if you don't have a lot of people, even if you don't have a lot of money. Your theory of change is important and should be tied into this whole M&E process. A theory of change means the following, if you're not familiar with it. There's a current state, and then your organization's programming comes into play and interacts with that current state. And as a result, there's this new state. There's this transformed difference that's made. So that's the theory of change. Without your organization, these individuals would not have changed. And with your organization, this population of people will change in this manner. So that is sort of your hypothesis for what your organization is hoping to accomplish. And then you need to be measuring around that to see if you are having the desired effect. And lastly, on this pilot program or subset of your audience served, you don't need to measure everyone in order to get critical information. You can choose a pilot program or a subset of the group that you are serving, again, because the amount of time, money, resources that are going to be needed to measure everyone is beyond almost everybody's reach. But try to find a representative group that you could measure in such a way that if you share that information, it would be a reasonable proxy for all of the other types of work that you are doing, and would be something that a funder would accept and view very favorably. And then I just want to touch on for my last section and really want to open it up to questions as quickly as we can, is this notion of building a strategic plan. A strategic plan is not necessarily something that has to be overly complicated. It's something that has to be clear. And it is something that is intended to highlight maybe the 3 or 4 things that your organization is going to work on that's going to transform your organization from where it is now to whatever desired state you have over the next 2 or 3 years. And maybe the newer your organization is, maybe it's over the course of 6, 9, or 12 months. If it's a slightly more mature organization, you could look out a few years. But regardless, you really want to have a clear sense of these are the things that we're going to focus on. And sort of by definition, everything else that's not on the list is something that might get put aside for the time being. So the effect of that is it will focus your limited resources on what's needed to achieve those goals. You only have a certain amount of money. You might have just yourself or 1 or 2 other staff people in the early days. There's only a certain amount of work that you all can do. Let's make sure we're working on the right things. And by having this, it sort of allows you to monitor new and incoming ideas, monitor your programs, and spend time and money pursuing those things that are mission critical and within your strategic plan. And again, maybe setting other things off for now to the side for consideration down the road. But again, limiting what you do in terms of focus in the short term. The other element of a strategic plan that I find very helpful is that it gives your board an opportunity to participate in setting the strategy for the organization. This is one of sort of the fundamental roles of a board of directors, hopefully, even if it's a very founder-driven or a founder-heavy organization. The board should play as engaged and an active role as possible in setting the agenda for the organization in concert with senior staff. And the result of this is that helps create a framework for fundraising. So if you're going out and fundraising, maybe 1 or 2 elements of your strategic plan becomes something that you campaign and rally around so that you can focus the messaging of your fundraising efforts. And then you'll also know within your strategic plan which benchmarks you're going to measure to see if you are having the kind of growth, hitting the targets that you as an organization have outlined. So with that, I certainly wanted to pause in terms of what I have. I'm going to share, Carla's going to share, I guess, my contact information. If people want to reach out to me, that's my email address. at .org, and people can reach me that way. If you have put your, Marty, thank you. I see that. If you've put your email address in there, I will be more than happy to share this PDF with you. But I certainly want to open it up to questions that people might have. Carla, if you see any questions in particular, unmute and share those. Otherwise, I'm just going to read through what folks are saying real quickly.
There's one question in Q&A.
How often do you suggest you review or update your strategic plan? So that's a really good question. I think the answer to that is as often as is necessary. If there are circumstances which change, let's say there's a global pandemic, just hypothetically, and you might need to go back and look at your strategic plan and say, well, we were going to expand our programming in this manner, or we were going to build our volunteer base in this manner. And you realize as a result of something that's happened either internally or in this case externally, that you need to review your priorities and maybe rewrite the strategic plan, then that is a perfect example. If there are major changes in the funding world or other things of that nature, that might be an opportunity to update or review your strategic plan. And obviously, many times, if there's a change in critical and key staff, maybe in a leadership capacity, then that is another opportunity. But it's not something that should be fiddled with, sort of change for change's sake. It's something that should have some sustainability to it. And I like a 2 to 3 year planning horizon because that enables you to kind of think about it long and hard and build in the kinds of systemic change and processes you need in order to make progress against certain things. If it's really just a program or a tactic, then that's something that could be accomplished rather quickly. It probably doesn't belong in the strategic plan as a major focus area to start with. All right. Is there an ideal number of board members? I really like this question. And I don't think the answer is there isn't an ideal number. I think what I've seen boards that are as few as 3, and I've seen boards that are 60. And I don't think either of those represents what I would consider an ideal number. I had typically on my board 10 to 12 board members. Again, you will have a certain, whether it's the 80-20 rule or whatever you want to say, like not every board member is going to be as successful and pulling their weight potentially as much as everyone else. Again, depending on what you are expecting from board members, the benefit to having a slightly larger board is that if you have committees, if you have a fundraising committee, if you have an event committee, if you have a finance committee, then if you have 6 board members, then it feels like everybody's going to be on every committee and then they don't become committees. It's really just the work of the board. If you have 15 to 20 board members, you could logically divide the board members among 3, 4, 5 committees and have the workload spread around a little bit more. So again, for me, it was a function of my expectations of how often I wanted to communicate with board members and sort of what I felt was sort of that comfortable number I could wrap my arms around. I think growing the board past that 12 into the 15, 18 range was maybe a more ideal target. And we were on a pathway to do that when I exited the organization. So great question. Other questions, either in the chat or the Q&A? Board best practices and donor stewardship was one of the areas that was brought up into the chat initially. So I would say donor stewardship, which is maybe the easier one to address because it's a little bit more of a narrow topic, is something that needs to be thought out. Obviously, not every donor is the same. Donor stewardship starts with a thank you. An immediate thank you, not necessarily an auto response thank you from the giving platform. It should be something that has a much more personal feel to that. depending on the size of your donor base and maybe the size of your staff or the size of your board, would determine if you have the capacity to call and engage board members that have given above a certain level. Again, a major gift is a relative concept. For some organizations, a major gift could be something over $500. For another organization, it could be something over $1 million. But when you are thinking about stewardship, it is really making sure that donors understand fundamentally that you have received and appreciate their gift, and that you are you're going to take those resources and spend them in the following manner. Not necessarily specifically, but this types of things. This will enable us to add more staff that's going to increase our after-school programming, or we will be able to open up our new branch in this geography that's going to give us access to this population. So I think stewardship is critical. People want to be thanked. People want to know that their gift is making an impact. There is no right answer in terms of how many times a donor should be contacted during the year. In terms of thanking them, I think you can certainly thank a donor more than once in a given year, but I don't know that you need to thank them over and over and over again unless they're off the charts making some kind of massive gift. It's really just about the sincerity and the consistency of that communication, and then reaching out to them, whether it's through an annual campaign or something else like that in the future, to then potentially engage them for their next gift and their gift after that. If they're a potential major donor, then you might have a different approach where you're contacting them and potentially sitting down with them either virtually or face-to-face, depending on what happens in the world, and trying to see about what about the organization resonates with them, and whether they might consider increasing their involvement in the organization, either from a personal perspective or a financial perspective. Board best practices. I really spend a lot of time on Board Source, and Board Source is an organization that really sort of publishes and researches all of these areas around best practices. And there's some things that they provide free of charge on Board Source, and there's other things that there's a charge for, like an annual subscription fee. It's not exorbitant. So I've really found them to be a tremendous resource. So if you had a specific issue that you were concerned about, whether it's financial stewardship, or whether it's succession planning, or whether it's how often a board should meet, or any of the things that could be on your mind as you type that question, then they have specific papers and research done around all of those issues. So I really encourage you to spend time with them and use them as a resource. What if there's a board member who doesn't pull their own weight? How do you eliminate them? So that's a great question, and that's come up, and I have fired board members before. I don't know if they've felt fired because it's been done very gently, but I think what happens is the most critical thing, or the best way around this, I feel, is to have an evaluation process that's done on an annual year with very clear criteria. And so you're going to chart each of the board members. Did they attend board meetings? How many? Check. Did they serve on a committee? If so, whatever. Did they make a personal gift? Yes. What was their fundraising goal for the year? Whatever. Whatever the things are that you have in your roles and responsibilities, how did they perform against those? Did they potentially identify another prospective board member? Are they engaged in volunteering and spending time within your organization? Whatever the things are that are important to you, when you've highlighted them, you measure the board members. And if they're coming up woefully short across a number of things, then it's the purpose for a conversation where you might be able to say something like, it looks like you weren't able to do some of the things that you had hoped to do when you joined the organization. Do you still feel like this is a good fit for you, or has something changed? And invariably, in my experience, if you give somebody who's clearly not working out an opportunity to leave, one of two things happen. They will leave and be glad and relieved that you say, listen, I'm not upset. It just, everybody's circumstances change, and they will take that and they will jump off, and that is fine. or they will use that as sort of a wake-up call to pay more attention and do the things that are expected of them. But having a having a transparent board accountability, board assessment each year that's shared. Maybe it's anonymous as to who the board members are, but every board members know that it's being done. And then you can use that as a basis for that conversation. I find to be a really good way of sort of creating that accountability that you'd hope to have within your board, and so that the other board members aren't resenting another board member who may not be holding up their end of the deal. So again, I think it's pretty easy to measure. You don't have to make it super scientific, but just having some system that you implement on a regular basis will help solve that problem. Other questions? These are great questions. So Sydney, I don't know what a fiscal sponsor is. You talked about that with that's their dream. So can you explain more about what you're talking about? And I'm not sure if you're still there, and if you're not, that's okay. Let's see what else is there. Carla, are you seeing anything else that we should address?
The capacity building and startup social enterprise.
Where are you seeing that? Sorry. Got it. Okay. I see that. So a startup social enterprise is in many, I mean, again, that can take, that's a phrase that maybe has a lot of different meanings to it. If it could be it could be sort of a social component to a for-profit business. It could be anything of those nature. I think a lot of these principles apply in terms of strategic planning, in terms of measuring your impact and things of that nature. Capacity building is really just understanding what is needed for an organization to be successful. So take a soup kitchen as an example. What does a soup kitchen need? A soup kitchen maybe needs a space in order to have its clients come for meals. It needs food products to serve, and it needs money to pay staff to maybe purchase certain food items, to pay the light bill, to pay the rent, etc. Now, capacity building for an organization like this could look at the following. Maybe I'm going to try to find a place for them to serve their meals that will not charge them rent. So that would be an incredible way to build the capacity of the organization. Or maybe they have a location in spot A, but I'm going to find them a spot in spot B, or find them a food truck or some other mobile means to reach people where they are. So capacity building could have that definition within that organization. It could also mean helping to identify sources of food that they could acquire without having to purchase them. So maybe there's grocery stores or restaurants or other partners potentially who would want to be part of what you are trying to accomplish, and building those partnerships and those relationships in a way that could grow the capacity of the organization. And sort of third and sort of most sort of simplistically is just raising money. Raising money is capacity building. The more money you have, typically, the more people you can help, whether that means hiring more staff, having more programming, providing the same amount of stuff that you can provide to 50 people, you can now provide it to 100 people. So capacity building really can be nuanced within each organization. It doesn't have to be strictly tied to money. It has to be whatever that organization needs to thrive and deliver its programming. Just in the final few moments here, I just want to encourage again anyone who would like a copy of the slides to put their email address either in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will make sure we get those to you. And I wanted to thank you. This is my first opportunity to participate in Twin Cities Startup Week, and I'm passionate about this kind of work, helping nonprofit organizations grow. I am more than happy to set up time free of charge with anybody that has attended today for us to talk in a little bit more depth about the challenges that you may have, and we could have that conversation at both of our mutual convenience. And even though I consult for a living, I would be more than happy to put some time in on the house for attending this session as a thank you to you for your energy and providing such great questions and for being here today. And I really appreciate your time and effort, and enjoy the rest of in Twin Cities Startup Week. Best of luck with your nonprofit involvement, whether you're a staff member or a board member or just an investor or funder. So again, thank you so much, and have a great rest of the week.